And welcome to Hannity Combs. Thank you for being with us. I'm Sean Hannity. We get right to our top story tonight. The world watched this weekend as Al Gore's Live Earth concerts went off around the world, or maybe not. Many people are criticizing the event today as not being impressive or as popular as Live Aid or Live 8 in the past. There are even some concerns tonight about whether or not the concert themselves were environmentally friendly. But none of this stopped the typical shrill end-of-the-world rhetoric from environmental extremists. And one of their targets, shockingly, even included little old me. Take a listen at what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said at the New Jersey concert.
So I'm going to tell you this, that the next time you see John Stossel or Glenn Beck or Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity, these flat earthers, these corporate toadies lying to you, lying to the American public, and telling you that global warming doesn't exist. You send an email to their advertisers and tell them you're not going to buy their products anymore.
A very angry man. Joining us now with more on the Live Earth Hot Air, author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming, Chris Horner, the president and founder of the Global Warming Conference, John Cleveland, and from Natural Resource Defense Council, John Quashman is with us. John, welcome back.
Good to see you.
First of all, he not only said that about me, you know, flat earthers, corporate toadies, we're lying. Then he also said about corporations, he called them villainous, that put their interests above the American people's interests, that corporate interests, that they're traitors, and we should treat corporations like traitors.
Well, Sean, I'll tell you, I think that at some point somebody's going to begin asking the question when it was that conservatives decided they were going to surrender conservation.
Every time you're on, you give me a talk. No, I'm asking you about his rhetoric. Does that bother you?
Well, you're not going to get Bobby here to talk about Bobby's rhetoric. What I can tell you is that you've got companies, oil companies, auto companies in this country that have signed up and are on record now calling for concrete limits on global warming emissions.
You came here. I don't want. If you're not going to answer a question, I want to ask you one. If you're going to give me your talking points, I'll just go to our other guest, Chris Horner. First of all, the incendiary rhetoric here, when you have somebody like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who travels on private planes, who supports wind farms but not outside the Kennedy compound, says about corporations that they're villainous, that they put their interests among American interests, that it's treason, and we need to start treating corporations like traitors. Does he want to kill them?
I don't know. The most striking thing should be to anyone that the people who claim to so aggressively loathe Joe McCarthy are so quick to embrace his tactics. I expect to be asked, and we often are, the equivalent of, are you now or have you ever been a global warming skeptic? And the answer is, like 50% of the public, according to the Ipsos Mori poll for BBC and over 17,000 scientists, yes, we see this as, we see the alarmism for what it is. The flat earthers, I do want to remind everybody, were an elite cadre that insisted there should be no more debate, there's a consensus, and stooges of the globe-making industry like Pythagoras pointed out that, in fact, they're wrong. We spend $5 billion in taxpayer dollars every year in the United States pursuing the knowledge that they claim to have. Maybe if we say, let's stop spending the money, the truth will come out.
John Cleveland, let me ask you this question. You know, Al Gore travels around in private jets. He uses 20 times...
Excuse me. Wrong.
Sir, I've chronicled it. He travels around in private jets. We've gone through a whole experience, and I'll give you the dates and times that we now have chronicled he's been on private jets. So that's a fact.
And how much of that has he done on commercial airlines?
He uses 20 times the amount of electricity than the average citizen of Tennessee. For this concert, how many of these guys traveled how many miles around the world and put a big carbon imprint? Is that a problem for you?
The thing that you're not telling people is that the organizers of this organization paid for carbon offset credits. Al Gore's home is 100% green. 100% green.
Chris Horner, this is a carbon offset company that he owns that he makes profit on. Let's talk about the carbon offset fraud.
Okay, real quickly, Sean, you have a priest. If your priest tells you every Sunday, as he probably does, that adultery is a mortal sin, and then holds a big orgy at his house and tells everybody about it, but then says, you still need to take me seriously about adultery because I bought adultery offsets. Would you keep going back to that church? That's what the high church of environmentalism is about. Remember, they just said, as long as obviously the wealthy, you buy offsets, it's 100% green. It's like the infidelity never occurred.
Let me ask John Cleveland about that. John, if polluting the earth is so wrong, rather than buy an offset to plant a tree, why don't they stop polluting the planet? Why don't, for example, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on this program admitted he flies in private jets, will not promise to give them up. Don't you think people like Al Gore and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. should lead by example?
I say that we shouldn't shoot the messenger. Let's look for
I
solutions
asked you if
to
they should lead
problems.
by example. Because they're telling
They are
people these
leading by
concerts
example.
to
As a matter of
walk
fact, they
and
do
to
lead
ride
by example.
bicycles. Shouldn't they give up their private jets?
Let me go to John Cortman. I'll speak to you, John. No one
Sure.
else wants to talk to you. They do lead by example, and the fact is nobody can be carbon neutral without doing something to offset it. We're all human beings who pollute the environment. So let's be realistic here. Al Gore,
Right.
and they want to make it personal to him rather than deal with the
I think there are a lot of people who would like to turn this into a conversation about a kind of environmentalism that doesn't exist in this country, and to paint a lot of folks who are perfectly concerned about quality of life and the environment in their communities as something that they're not. You do not need to live in a tree or a mud hut to care
But you
about
can't
the
take steps.
environment.
In fact, the message of this particular event, Mr. Cleveland, was that we could all take small steps. That's what this message was over the weekend. We can take small steps.
90% reduction, Alan.
I believe I was talking to Mr. Cleveland. I'll get to you in just a second, sir. But you can, we all can take small steps to do something for the environment, and that's what we take home from what happened over the weekend.
Yes, exactly. We can change light bulbs, for instance. Very simple thing to do.
Mr. Cleveland, Mr. Horner, let me go to you. Why is it that people who let me get your position. Do you deny that there's such a thing as global warming, or do you admit that there is such a thing, but it's not man-made? What's your position on it?
You tell me the year you want me to start, and I'll tell you if it's
How about
warmer
right
or
now?
cooler.
What's your
Since the
position?
time Christ walked the earth, it's cooler since when Christ walked the earth. It's warmer than the 1970s. It's warmed 1 degree Fahrenheit in the last 150 years, and man likely had something to do with it. That's as far as the consensus goes. You just said something that's patently untrue.
What's that?
This was just about swapping out a few light bulbs. One of those geniuses of the Brain Trust Corps put up on stage this weekend and said, how can the skeptics be upset about us calling for changing out a few light bulbs? And if you dig all the way down to Gore's highly publicized 7-point plan of a 90% reduction in energy use emissions, which according to Hoffert et al. In Science Magazine means 90% reduction in energy use, unless your colleagues there support nuclear energy, which we know they don't, you're talking about far more than swapping out a few light bulbs.
I didn't say swapping out a few light bulbs. What I said, John Cleveland, Mr. Cleveland, what I said, and I see you're nodding your heads, we can all take small steps, we can all do something to offset some of the pollution that even Chris Horner acknowledges we are responsible for.
You just said it was about small
Mr.
steps.
Horner,
It was not. It was
Mr.
about
Cleveland, I believe
90%
I'm talking
reduction.
to him now, that we can all do things to offset our participation in the planet, something that's unavoidable.
I'm not sure there's a question there. What's the question?
Well, I'd like you to address Chris Horner, who seems to be in denial about some of this and seems to just wave this off as if it's all bunk.
99%
Actually, I didn't
of the
say that.
scientists...
Hold on, Mr.
Excuse
Horner.
me.
What I said, Alan.
Hold on, Mr. Horner.
People heard what I said. People heard
Excuse
what I
me.
said.
Excuse me. 99% of the scientists in the world agree we have a serious problem and
What's
we
your
need to
source for
address
that?
it now.
What's your source for that? You just
Look
made that
at
up.
any
You just made
peer-reviewed...
that up.
I did not. Look at any peer-reviewed
99% of
scientific
scientists in the world.
journals.
Right,
Look at science or nature.
a lot more debate
The
to come
UN
up.
released
It is
this
not
week the
made up.
criticism showing they're not unanimous either. No,
A
you
lot more
just made
debate
that
straight
up.
ahead, and a liberal
Can't you
blogger
guys
that
not-
went from porn to politics.